Hi, everybody, and welcome to Real Talk Radio. I'm your host, Hillary Raimo. Today, I'm going to be talking to a panel of experts on THC. That little batty three-letter word that you hear a lot about when it comes to cannabis and why we shouldn't consume it, we shouldn't have it in our products, and why it's so bad for us. But today, I'm going to offer a different perspective with my three guests. It hopefully changes your mind and brings more awareness and changes how we see this, because I think right now on the collective platform, we're watching a very strategic propaganda machine go after THC and making the cannabis medicine that we consume legally or not less potent, and it's changing the structure of that plant. So we're going to be talking about that today. So sit tight, and hopefully by the end of this hour, you have a different perspective on THC. And the next time you go into a dispensary to buy a product, you might ask different questions. Joining me today from Switzerland is Merlin Gordon. He is the CEO of drugstore.com and headshopdistribution.com. Merlin has established himself as a well-known figure in the European cannabis community. With a focus on high-end products and designer concept stores, Gordon is redefining the image of cannabis and the CBD industry. As expert in retail management, distribution, product development, and horticulture, based between the U.S. and Switzerland, Gordon has had his finger on the pulse of the global cannabis movement. And we're going to be hearing the difference between the European cannabis industry and the American cannabis industry to see where the consistencies and inconsistencies lie. Also joining this panel is Josh Hoffman. Josh Hoffman is an entrepreneur and educator in the field of cannabinoid therapy. He works with healthcare professionals and durable medical equipment companies to educate them on the potential benefits of using hemp-derived CBD products and how to select credible companies in the industry to work with. And last but not least, joining me is Jeremy Jackson. You might know him from Baywatch. He's founder of Pachamama CBD. He's a certified nutritionist, personal trainer, fitness chef, and breathwork healer. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us, Hillary.
Great.
Yep.
So we're going to start with the first question, and I'm going to go around to each of you. I want to know, what is THC and why it is important? And I'm sure everybody listening wants to know that as well. Merlin, let's start with you.
Okay, so THC, to say it very easily so that everybody understands, is the side of cannabis that actually gives you what people are looking for, that high. That high is the THC side. Obviously, there are many other ingredients inside of cannabis. THC is just one of the cannabinoids. There is CBD that we obviously now know very well, but as well as CBN, CBG, THCV, CBC. There is a whole list of other cannabinoids that also have effects. Some of them we don't know as much about. At this point in time, we know the most about THC and CBD. THC is what everybody, as I said, is already familiar with. If you smoke cannabis, it is the high that you're getting. And the CBD obviously works in the body. But the THC has many benefits that the CBD does not have. And if you, let's say, split those two cannabinoids from each other, you're not getting every aspect of the plant. You're really just getting a very specific effect that you're then kind of synthesizing from the plant.
Josh, I want to ask you, continuing on that, is THC something that we really need to take out of the medicine that we're consuming, or is it something that we should perhaps consider keeping in? Should we relook at what it means to be high? Could this perhaps be pleasure endorphins that are being released because of the medicine?
That's a great question, and certainly one that will be debated for some time. I am on the side of the fence that the way that nature creates a hemp plant, it has the right amount of molecules and cannabinoids, flavonoids, terpenes that we don't want to necessarily denature or disturb. And when we start splicing the plant and separating the molecules, like maybe we have a CBD isolate, you're really you're lessening the chance of a therapeutic experience. In fact, THC has been shown to potentiate every other cannabinoid in the plant. Said another way, as the THC amount increases, so too does the efficacy of the entire medicine. But therein lies that double-edged sword, where past a certain percentage of THC, and everybody is different in this respect, but obviously one can begin to experience a psychotropic effect if they encounter too much THC rather. So full spectrum is, my philosophy. I think with a little bit of THC, the legal permissible limit, at least in the United States, is 0.3%. Obviously not near enough to get anybody high, but certainly enough to increase the potential therapeutic value of the formula.
Josh, couldn't it be said that the THC actually is the key to opening the receptors in the brain that allow the medicine to get into the endocannabinoid system?
Well, that's, THC certainly binds more directly to the CB1 receptor than CBD, which has a more indirect association to the receptors, which is equally as important. So it could be said that's a fairly accurate statement. Yeah, I would stand behind that. Yeah.
Okay. Jeremy,
Yes.
As the owner of Pachamama CBD, how do you make the decision on what products you're going to make for consumers? How is that selection for you when it comes to designing a strain or picking products?
Well, first and foremost, I'll just let you know that I'm a shareholder. My best friend is the owner. I do lifestyle development and product education, and I was here from the inception, so I can't steal all the credit for the company by any means. And I love what everybody's saying so far. THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, to be exact, is not the key, like you mentioned, but it is one tooth on the key. When you're looking at the endocannabinoid system, you're looking at an identical match to this hemp extract. And when you knock one of the keys out, say isolating CBD by itself, or say knocking out the THC in a broad spectrum, you might be able to jiggle the key around and force it in, but the lock's not going to open perfectly. So when you have that full spectrum, you do get that perfect fit, and you do get to turn on that endocannabinoid system, which everybody has. We produce CBD 30 milligrams by ourselves every day. If you've never even seen a joint, if you've never even taken a hemp product, if you've never even heard of it, you're still producing it. But like many factors in our environment today, in our system today, we don't have the ability to produce these precious things, like gut bacteria, due to environmental issues, due to unhealthy food, due to chemicals, lack of sun, lack of exercise, overstress. Our endocannabinoid systems are being turned off, and this is the system that is responsible for so many things. We're barely scratching the surface of how monumental this endocannabinoid ECS is. So, you see all types of different reactions with people. Oh my gosh, my feet, they don't hurt, or the swelling, or the sleeping, or the anxiety, Rick Simpson oil, healing cancer. I mean, we've really been lied to for a long time. And if you look back in the history of hemp, you will just be blown away. There's a major unlearning that has to take place, getting back to our ancestors and to the primal plant medicines to see what is really capable for the human body. And I love that you asked me about our selection, because at Pachamama, we do single strain, single origin. That means we grow from a non-GMO seed. We go from the same seed every time, so that you can have that reliability in the product. If you buy a product today, and if you buy a product in 2 years, it's going to have the same color. It's going to have the same taste. It's going to have the same effect. You'll never have any guesswork and wonder if this batch, quote unquote, worked as well. And we have 84 patents on an extraction process. This is so important. So many people are treating stuff with chemicals. So many people, even with regular food. This is a precious, sacred plant medicine that Mother Earth has given us, and it's so important to extract it with no chemicals. So we have a heated air and pressure extraction that doesn't damage any of the phytonutrients, that actually warms up and activates some of the terpenes and the flavor profiles. And we want to deliver it the way it was meant to be delivered, because we want people to experience that freedom, and we want people to have that improvement of quality of life that everybody is looking for, that everybody deserves.
Thank you for that. And I want to mention to people listening that cannabinoids, compounds like THC, can be found abundantly in human breast milk. So for babies that are nursed when they're born, they actually get THC and cannabinol, which like to stick to fat, in breast milk. And so I'm wondering also, and this is kind of a side note, how much we've gotten away from breastfeeding. It's very often demonized as well as something, and babies are just, sent right to formula when they're born. How much that has actually affected the imbalance of the endocannabinoid system. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
It's a very interesting question.
Well, maybe we can talk about we can talk about that down the road too. But when I found that out, I thought that was very surprising, because as a mom of two kids, I nursed my kids as babies, and there was so much anti-breastfeeding coming into the space that it was very surprising, and I think a lot of women experience that. But I just want to mention that too, that THC is actually found in breast milk, so we get it if we're nursed, and if we're not, we don't. And I'm curious how that affects the health system. Moving on, what is THCA, and is it the same as THC? Merlin, are you there? I don't know.
I think he's back. Yeah. No problem.
Okay.
Hello? Yes.
Hi,
yeah,
Merlin. Okay, sorry, we lost you. I have a question for you.
THCA is basically the acid conversion of THC. So what it is even though it is basically THC, it's only active after basically 30 minutes in an oven. You would have to activate it. Then THCA is an active compound.
So it has to be heated in order for it to be active. Is that why you see THCA listed on dispensary labels for products? Oftentimes I see THC, and then I see a thing called THCA, and I know a lot of people don't understand what these subchemicals are. So how important is it for us to understand the percentages of that?
Well, first off, what people know now is that it's anti-inflammatory. There are some other things that they also consider it to be helpful in, but at the moment, THCA is one of these components that has much less research done on it. So in actuality, we don't know as much as we should about THCA, as well as we don't know basically anything about, CBN. We know small things like it's anti-insomnia and things like this. There's many ingredients in cannabis that we have no idea about. Then if you also look on, this is one side of the effect, is like THCA, THC. Then on the other side are all of the terpenes. And that has become one of the biggest areas of focus for research, is because we already know that cannabis has over 100 different terpenes. Some people say 140. It's a number that is always switching around. That number, all of those specific terpenes, we have some studies about. So not every single one has been studied, but, limonene, things we have studied, we know the effects, and some of them are specifically, also anti-inflammatory. They help you sleep, antidepressants. All of these added into THC and CBD are what most likely gives you the entourage effect. And when people discuss sativa or indica, now science is kind of looking at those two sides of it as being not actually different in terms of effects, and that the effects come down to the specific terpenes that are in the plant. And based on the terpene profile, the plant should give you what we would consider maybe a sativa-ish effect. You could get an indica that would have the same effect as a sativa based on these terpenes and other things that also have major effects on your high or experience from the plant. And, when we look at that, that's also just, again, even though that's the second level of effect, that is also not the end of it. There is the third level that has the least information about it, is the flavonoids. And the flavonoids most likely have also a great effect, but they're in even smaller numbers in cannabis plants. So when you actually synthesize, basically we haven't had great ways to study them in particular because we have such small amounts of them from the actual plants. In the future, we hope to know much more about flavonoids and terpenes and all of these other cannabinoids that have major effect on the human, on human beings, and we are really just in the beginning of that stage.
Why are we so ignorant when it comes to the cannabis plant? Is it something that we haven't had the opportunity to study well enough, or is it because independent labs haven't had that privilege and only government labs have?
I think that is one of the major reasons. It has basically been thrown to the backside of.
Yep.
Yeah, it's been thrown to the backside of. Hello.
We hear you. Yeah, we hear you.
Okay,
Sorry,
okay,
I'm not sure. Maybe someone needs to mute their mic just so we don't have the background noise. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. So basically, I would say that research is the number one thing that is the hindrance. If we would be finally able to research this on a government level and actually be able to really study every aspect of the cannabis plant, that is the beginning of what we actually would need to understand it. We really are. I mean, if you look at the way that we have looked at cannabis, we've looked at cannabis from the illegal side of the market, where we call these things strains when a strain isn't supposed to be used for a plant. A strain is a disease. These are chemovars or chemotypes. Basically, these are types of, these are a variety of a plant. And if you think about that, from the very beginning of the way that we even discuss these things, we are already making major mistakes. We call them strains. They're not strains. Already the scientific community looks at us for saying things like strains, and they look at us as an ignorant group because we are not using even the correct terminology. At the same time, it's been, the cannabis industry has been forced to the underground. That is the reason why there's so much misinformation and so little that is actually known, is because we have spent so much time working or discovering these things basically on the black market amongst growers that are taking great risk. And there has been some studies that are now finally showing some of the effects of these other aspects, but very few in comparison to, almost any other plant. And we have studied almost everything else more than we have studied cannabis. The few things that I can see as one of the great things about Canada finally legalizing is that, at least in Canada, there's going to be some serious studies done on the effects of maybe some of or all of these aspects. And as the world slowly moves into legalization, which I think it is a domino effect, that it's going to fall, all of them will fall eventually. I think that this knowledge is only going to be greatly increased as time progresses.
Well, Canada has also decided to tax THC, not like we do here in the United States yet, but they have companies who are specifically adept in handling THC and the products that produce from that. And they've decided to tax it. So if you want THC in your product, you have to pay more money for it. So I wonder if that's coming to the United States as well. How does that work in Europe, Merlin? Is that something that's going on over there? Or
basically, in Europe, they have really done it a country by country kind of rollout. So each country has its own specific rules. And even though in Europe-wide, you would say that the THC limits are 0.2, so they're actually a little bit less than the US. Besides that, individual countries have made specific rules. So Italy has 0.6, which is actually higher than the US. Switzerland has 1%, which is actually the highest anywhere except in countries that have gone fully legal on a federal level, even though it's so little. And most countries, like in Italy, they do not tax it as a specific product. They just take a VAT tax on it. In Switzerland, they put all cannabis under a tobacco tax. So we have the highest level of taxation, where it's 35%. Country by country, these have been very different regulatory environments. And even right now, it is being discussed in multiple governments in Europe what will actually happen. And certain countries in Europe have actually made CBD illegal. Poland being one off the top of my head. France has also had significant issues with CBD, even though they originally allowed it. They're also a pretty conservative country and pretty, I would say, if we're talking about Europe, one of the countries that's further away from legalization than others. I would say one of the countries closest would be Switzerland and Portugal, or countries like this that are a little bit more liberal. Italy, not most likely very soon. And I would say most of Europe, it'll be a hard fight in certain areas, especially in the Norwegian countries, even though you would expect them to be very liberal. They look at cannabis as a hard drug. I mean, they treat it in their laws, actually very much like the U.S. does. And also just societally, they look at it as something that people should not be consuming. And if you are a druggie. So there are certain countries in Europe that I think will probably be moving to legalization very soon. Others that will definitely take much longer. But in general, they are looking at it each individually and have their own regulatory kind of environment set up. And it's always interesting to see how it's working out. Even we see it in the U.S. and by state rollouts, they kind of decide to do different things constantly. Certain states have it completely controlled by the state government. Others are, much looser. And it's very interesting to see which one is going to be the dominant regulatory system, because that one will probably even be rolled out to countries as they, also open up to cannabis. So yeah, it's a period where we don't know a whole lot, and regulatory environment is constantly changing. I mean, in a way, throughout the whole world with this plant at the moment. But at the same time, it's one where I think in the future we have obviously, great opportunities. And as we show the government that this plant is not the dangerous plant that they have said for so long, I think that we will definitely have a pretty easy job convincing, our representatives once the facts get really shown and put forward, which is just, as we said, it's the one thing. It came from an illegal side of the market. It takes time for us to gather the science, especially since we've been hindered in such great ways. But I think slowly now we are finally at a place where the science is starting to catch up. It's not here yet, but it is slowly moving in the right direction. And hopefully very soon we will know much more about this, and also then be able to go to governments and create regulatory environments that work, because many places are setting up a system that is not sustainable for growers or retailers. And if they do that, obviously, then they shut people back into the illegal market. And we realize that if you do that, the vape crisis in the U.S. is basically a result of that, of people going to the illegal side of the market again, unregulated products, and because people trying to avoid those taxes, these different things that they're setting on producers, and basically they set up the system to try to be as hard for a smaller cannabis producer to get into, and basically have forced it to be a place where only corporations can play, because the small cannabis producer will be completely wiped out by the costs associated with running a legal business.
It's so frustrating. Jeremy, I'd like to ask you this question. Thank you, Merlin. What is the difference between sativa and indica for those listening?
You can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. I'm very similar to Josh in the mentality that the hemp is the way to go. I myself am in recovery. I don't do mind and mood altering drugs, but I do believe in plant medicine. I do believe in a holistic lifestyle, and I do believe in the unfortunately Rocky-esque story of hemp. And I encourage people to really do their research. I mean, this stuff is so easy to find, and we have been being lied to for so long. And big pharma is killing people. I mean, 12,500 years ago, hemp was our first mass-produced crop, historically documented. You know what I mean? You can find this stuff. Our paper was on it. The first draft of the Declaration of Independence was written on it. First 5 presidents farmed hemp. A third of the Constitution signers grew hemp. The cotton gin came around, and this guy, Eli Whitney, demonizes hemp crops and marijuana crops, saying it was the Native Americans and the Chinese and the whites. We don't want to give them money. Let's grow our own stuff, and it's cotton instead. I mean, it's been stolen from us, just like many, many other answers, solutions, and antidotes to our daily problems of not being our best selves. So, I love that Josh mentioned the flavanols. 20 years ago, vitamin C was over the counter. Take vitamin C. It was extracted. It was isolated. You have to have the flavanols and flavonoids in the vitamin C to even uptake it. And it's the same way with these hemp extracts, and or with, if you need THC, high THC medicines, whether you're really hyper and you need the indica, you need to calm down, or you want to wake up and you want to feel more activated, you go with the sativas, and people need to find out for themselves. They need to get on the internet. They need to do real research. They need to join some boards and some forums, and just know that we're being lied to. Chicken, for example, is not juicy. When you walk into the grocery store and you see juicy chicken with this pink fluid, chickens do not produce pink fluid. What is that? Start asking questions. The FDA does not give a damn about you. They want you eating Eggo waffles and drinking, orange juice from concentrate with frickin' corn syrup in it. Start doing your research. Start getting involved. This is the process of self-love. Mother Earth, Mother Nature, God, Creator has provided the answers for us, and we've gotten so far away from it. It's disgusting. It's crippling. People are dying. Obesity is out, heart disease. Everything is out of control. Gym memberships are higher than ever. Everybody's fat, dying, and sick, and has anxiety and has pain. And they're going to the doctors because they trust them. But the doctors get 4 hours of nutrition education. They are not there to promote wellness. They are there to mask diseases, so you have a customer for life, a client for life, to keep coming back and paying for this stuff. You can grow your own stuff. You can do this free. You know what I mean? That's my standpoint on it. I don't get too involved in. I mean, if I have somebody dying from cancer, if I have somebody sick, crippling pain, definitely they're going to need to get a different variance of this medication. They're going to need to get a higher dose. They're going to need that THC. And then you're going to split the difference between the indicas and the sativas and find out which one works for them, to help them have some normality in their life and get out of this box.
Well, the endocannabinoid system is about balance. So it reminds me that if our doctors and medical people have not even been taught that the system exists in the human body, what else have they been taught? Josh, I'd like to ask you what your opinion is on the difference between sativa and indica.
I think that Jeremy, nailed it. And, what I typically tell people, I say, an indica is going to express itself more in the body and give you a deeper relaxation. And sometimes, when people can't remember how, the word indica, we sometimes say, remember, indica, in the couch. Get it? Indica, in the couch. You're in the couch.
I get it.
Okay, or indica in the chair. You're relaxing. So it's more of a body type expression, and certainly there to help sedate and relax and calm you. Whereas the sativa, I like to say, it expresses itself more cerebrally. In the brain, your cognition, your thought, it lifts you up, like Jeremy pointed out. It gives you energy, and not just physical energy, but brain energy. I find that people tell me when they try a sativa, they get all project oriented, like something that their spouse or significant other has been, yelling at them to complete for the last 3 months. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, I want to finish that today, So, Jeremy nailed it when he said, it depends on people's symptoms, what they're going through, what they're trying to mitigate, and the symptoms that they're trying to reduce. So there may be a point in a day where an indica is more appropriate, like for the nighttime, or where an sativa or a hybrid during the day, is more appropriate because you don't want to be drowsy or sedate during the day if you have things to do. So it's really about understanding the person's symptoms, condition, severity of the symptoms, how often they present, and also what other medications they may be taking, because, everything has a side effect. And we're not so concerned about their medicines because we think there might be some terrible drug-on-drug interaction. It's just more so to determine if, sometimes people take, and listen, it's a pleasure to be on the phone with Merlin and Jeremy. I mean, I've known Jeremy's brand for a long time, and the reputation, precedes itself. Pachamama is great. And, you have people all over the country reporting, phenomenal results. And then all of a sudden, somebody takes that and doesn't really have a result. My first question, I know I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but I ask them if they're taking an SSRI. How much serotonin's in their body, in their blood? Because guess what? The lower the amount of serotonin, the tougher you're going to have at getting a therapeutic result from CBD, and you may require much, much higher concentrations. That's a whole nother conversation, but it's just having a conversation with somebody, being real, being transparent, finding out what's going on with them, and then, offering them a solution without making any crazy claims like nobody on this phone call has done. And that's what I love about these guys, their passion, their knowledge, and they're doing it right. You have too many people out there, and I think it was Jeremy or maybe even Merlin said it. It's like there's so much false information out there that we kind of have to go and scrub their brains and have them unlearn that stuff and then learn the right way to do it. So the more and more people out there like you, like Merlin, like Jeremy, that are, delivering the message properly, the better everybody's going to be off in the long run.
Well, thanks, Josh. I appreciate that. I'm sure others do too. So it brings me to my next question, which is, what is a hybrid? And why does it matter? When I've toured dispensaries in Massachusetts, Washington State, Colorado, and California, and one of the things that I've noticed when I walk in as a customer is the people have different levels of education and knowledge of the product. And so far, people, have been pretty good about it. But every now and then you get somebody who really doesn't know how to explain or looks at you kind of cross-eyed when you ask if you have organic sun-grown products, because as mentioned earlier, pesticides is a problem. And one of the things they are finding in the vaping cases that they're having so many problems with is that there are intensely high levels of pesticides in the vape product, along with oil. They have actually found petroleum in some of the vaping products as well. So that's for later on in the show. But for right now, what is a hybrid? What is crossbreeding and gene editing? Merlin, let's start with you.
Okay, so hybrids. This is one of these other parts of the industry that is completely, filled with misinformation, because when you buy something in the store and it says it's a sativa or it says an indica, I can guarantee you it is a hybrid, and it is dominant, maybe sativa dominant or indica dominant. But again, that has really, it has really changed the way that we look at it, because there is no pure strains. The pure strains on the market, you'd have to find a landrace from somewhere out in Africa to get something that might be a pure sativa or a pure indica. And even those ones, based on the fact that now genes have been taken from Europe or from other places, plants that, people consider to be much better for growing and making hash or something like this in Morocco. Even if you went to Morocco, often the genes are mixed now because strains have been taken, or chemovars, as I said, strain is an incorrect term, but again, strains have been taken there, and it has now crossed naturally, because basically plants can pollinate between, this is also a debated topic, it can be between 3 miles or 30 miles that those pollen could possibly carry and basically cross with another plant. If there's a plant within several miles of the other plant, there is already a chance that they have crossed and their genes are now mixed. We basically know very little about most of these things because, as I said, it went from the illegal side of the market. We have never had a full, a actual gene bank that is showing us what sativa is or what an indica is. Nowadays, supposedly even the High Times has said that in all of the cannabis that they have tested over I believe it was since the 80s, they have had 1% that they believe is a pure sativa or an indica, and 99% of the plants, and these are ones that are going to the cannabis cup. So I guarantee you in your dispensary, it's probably even less likely that you're going to find that 1% that is sativa or indica. It is always a hybrid, almost guaranteed. There are levels to the hybrid factor, but at the same time, it is something that everybody is being misinformed about. And it is something that I also was for many, many years completely misinformed about, and also thought of it as this way or that way. That's why also the sativa or indica effect is very hard to 100% say it is that, because sativa and indica are plant species that have visual distinctions, but on a actual molecular level, there is not a difference actually between the two plants. Even in their terpene profiles, it can be very similar. There's more myrcene in indica, so people think that might be one of the biggest factors in the couch lock effect, or the indica in the couch. The couch lock effect is possibly coming from the myrcene terpene. But that's why we know so little about it, that we have been, as I said, it came from a legal side of the market. We looked at the visuals because we didn't know how to get a deeper analysis. We'd see that the sativa plant has longer fan leaves, so the leaves are longer, they're thinner. Their plants are taller. The indica plant is fatter leaves. Their fan leaves are fatter. They are the leaves are shorter, and in general, the plants are also shorter. They're more bushy. They obviously are the ones that have more THC. They're more powerful in general. Then, of course, there's a third. There's ruderalis. Nobody talks about it because we don't want it. Ruderalis is a plant that is also, it's one of the three. There's sativa, indica, and ruderalis, but ruderalis is the one that has very little THC, has very little CBD, has very little of anything. It is the weakest of the three. It has been used to cross and make certain autoflowering genes, and specific genes have been used crossing ruderalis, but in general, it's not beloved at all. But in science now, we have been able to break these down to their terpenes and to their CBD and their cannabinoid contents. And when you break some of these plants down, you can find sativa or indicas that are basically doing the exact same thing, have the same profile or very similar profiles. So in those situations, it's very hard to then say sativa is one way, indica is the other, because there are sativas that have more of this, indicas that have more of that. There's an indica that can give you what you would consider a sativa, that uplifting high, but it's really just based on the components we know so little about. As I said, the cannabinoids are making a huge effect. CBN, CBG, we don't even know these things. There's just recently, there was a gene, a genetic that was released in, I believe it was Spain, after, I think it was the University of Barcelona that created this in conjunction with another cannabis seed company in Spain. They have, I think, the first high CBG strain available on the market. That's the first of its kind. Before that, we could find CBD in such tiny numbers, we could never even study it. So again, sativa, indica, it is in itself also a huge mix, because hybrids have basically taken over the entire market, and we don't know what is a real pure race strain anymore, because we'd have to go to those places that have those land races and basically test it ourselves, come up with basically an equivalent to the Human Genome Project for cannabis. You have to gather all of the genes, make a database where you can see actual differences, and then we could test to actually maybe find out, is this a sativa? Is this an indica? Where is it from? All those things. That's just the beginning. There's a couple companies in America that are trying to build some type of like genome database that would maybe have that. It's still in its infancy, and many are competing companies that we don't know who's going to be the winner. Also, I don't really think it's great that it would be a privately owned business. I prefer it to be a NGO that somehow we have that information easily available, and then everybody will be able to test and match up their chemovar to a specific gene in the database. That aspect is still many years away, and that's something that really will only come with legalization. And maybe now in Canada, as we know, that's the first step. They're at least over there fully legal. They can actually do some of these things. And, the future is bright, and we hope to just know more and more. But again, it is one of these aspects of the industry that also is filled with misinformation. And we are just at the tipping point and the very beginning of the knowledge that will come around this entire topic.
Well, I hope Monsanto doesn't beat that race and make us a wonderful
so well.
GMO strain that has been aligned with their past products, which has gene editing really eliminated the heirloom strains? You have heirloom vegetables, it's about the seed. And if anybody has taken over seeds in this world, it's definitely companies like Monsanto with the budgets to enable the research to map these genomes so that they can better understand them. And you and I, Merlin, were speaking before the show about gene editing and how it can be traced back to a certain time, really. And human intervention has really cross-contaminated these strains to the point of no return? Or do you think it's possible to go back and find an heirloom strain at this point? Because most products don't have seeds in them, so they're impotent in that way, right?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, basically, the breeders have tried with autoflowering or basically strains that are already feminized. They have made it so that it is very hard to get a seed that will give you more seeds. I mean, you can get it, but often also genetics are very unstable. So, I mean, I have lots of experience in the horticulture side since thedrugstore.com, where we are in growing, we are in that side. So we have a lot of experience there. And I can tell you right now, it's one of the hardest aspects of the business because there are so many different pieces to it. And the genes, if you look at it, I mean, we are constantly dealing with new strains that have been created, and strains have short shelf lives. To find a stable strain is incredibly rare. And many of the most popular strains, when people go to their local, dispensary and they say, hey, this is the same strain I had last time. Why does it taste so different? Why does it look so much worse this time? Sometimes it's the guys are completely, not serious and they're repackaging the same different strain with that name. But other times it's because the strain is not stable. So sometimes strains can be very stable, produce great products for maybe even several years. But at some point, that strain is not as strong as it used to be, and it will basically slowly, progressively get worse as its genes kind of falter. And that is a huge problem in the cannabis industry. So in general, most of the strains people are working with are new strains. They have not always the longest shelf life. People try to hold seeds in seed banks, some in Amsterdam, some obviously in America now, to try to hold strains so then they can go back and pick up that seed to then try to bring back that strain. But in general, it is very hard to keep them stable. And in nature, as I said, there is a lot of cannabis that is grown naturally throughout the world. But the issue is we are such a globalized society that cannabis has now started to move from all over the world. And if it is in a country where there is a cannabis industry, an illegal cannabis industry, then most likely they already have mixed the genes, because the genes in general, land races were not as powerful. The reason we have done all of this gene editing, naturally with crosses or, it's still edited. This in the end makes it much, much harder to find anything that is 100% pure. There are companies that pride themselves on going to the furthest reaches of the world. I'll give them a shout out. Greenhouse Seeds, they've been around for a long time. They're also the creators of many names that are very popular in the strain. And basically White Widow would probably be their biggest one. Anyways, that company, which has been around since the 80s, they pride themselves on going everywhere in the world, to Africa, to South America. Really, they're going into the jungle, to the deepest part. They're trying to find a local who can take them to the field that's hidden in the mountains. And even then, you watch them. There's videos online. You can even watch them do this. Oftentimes, they'll go over there and they'll find the seeds. It is already genetically not pure. And to find a pure gene for them, even though they are on the search for it, and that's their business, is creating new genes and getting these land races from all over the world. They've already been doing it for many years. For them, it is a huge struggle to find a pure race. And it takes immense effort and immense time to actually find a pure land race. And even if we found that pure land race, basically, most likely it has been crossed with another land race in the area. Because as I said, the fact that cannabis pollen is going to reach such extreme distances, it means that if there is two types, even within several miles, and I mean, some people's estimates are 30 miles, if it's within 30 miles of each other, they could already crossbreed. And think about that, over thousands and thousands of years, the chance that they haven't is very low. So genes in general have become very muddled, but obviously some land races should be out there. They're just incredibly difficult to find, and nobody is growing any of those real land races for consumption, because in general they're much. I mean, they probably have very bad. Quantity coming off of it. I would imagine they're not the greatest with yield in general. That's one of those things. I mean, the tomatoes that we have now, and everything that we look at, all of our food has been manipulated in some way, right? A natural tomato used to be a much smaller thing. Now we have gigantic tomatoes that are unnatural. It's the same thing with cannabis. We took cannabis, we crossed them, and we made gigantic, powerful, incredibly strong with THC and CBD strains. But that is, again, just one aspect of it.
What's wrong with leaving the plant alone and letting it just be and consuming it the way it is? I mean, crossbreeding in nature is natural selection. You could just write that off to God, right? You know, it's just the way nature is. But when we have such a huge industry going in search of designer products, and gene editing, I'd like to ask Jeremy this question. Are designer strains the future of the cannabis industry? Are we looking at products that are going to be custom designed to the busy person who's going and just needs that product? Is it really about finding the perfect mix of combinations for people to purchase, or is there a higher purpose?
Well, unfortunately, to answer your question, what happened is during the 1800s in manufacturing plants in Germany really started blowing up, and we started pumping pollutants into the air, and we created acid rain. And that acid rain has eroded all of the bacteria that was naturally occurring in the soil. We had over 1,500 count of natural bacteria that existed elemental minerals. These elemental minerals and these natural bacteria that allowed plants, fruits, and vegetables to grow and have their own natural defenses against pesticides are gone, literally gone. Our only hope is finding ancient frozen tundra that still has soil that has been untouched by our toxic environment. So we had to start using NPK. It was a guy, Justus von Liebig, who discovered the NPK, and he found that the fruits and vegetables grew big and fast and strong, and he mysteriously disappeared when he wanted to come out and tell everybody, never mind, it's no longer nutritious. So basically all of our fruits and vegetables are growing nowhere near. I have a feeling that if we were to eat a 1,000-year-old salad, we would probably be high off the salad because the nutrients are nowhere near what they used to be. So, we've really backed ourselves into a corner here. Will science fix that, or will a collective consciousness and a demand fix that? And that's going to be up to the people to be sick and tired of being sick and tired and start coming together to find some solutions. We're doing our part at our company by trying to be as natural, as organic, as holistic and chemical free as possible. I think we're doing more than most people are, but it's about raising that awareness and education.
Well, I definitely think the soil is a big part of it, like you said, and I don't think people really have too much connection to that, because how many people garden? They go to the grocery store, they get their food with the juice and the chicken, and they don't think much of it, right? It's going to be a really interesting thing for food as well, especially as we go forward in a global sense. Josh, we're about the end of the show, and I'd like to have your opinion on where you think the industry is headed here in the United States and what we have to be really careful and selective with.
Yeah. So first of all, I think that, piggybacking on what Jeremy said and what Merlin said about, what is the future of this, I do think that customizing medicine and not necessarily denaturing the plant, and removing this and that, but adding the different terpene profiles, as Merlin was alluding to. You could have a sativa, which most people know and think, hey, that makes you energetic and gives you, thought power and, a little bounce in your step. But depending on the terpene profile, that sativa could treat or, express itself to you just like an indica would. He alluded to the beta-myrcene, alpha and beta-myrcene terpene, and that's sedative, right? So if we increased that in a formula, chances are we should have a response similar to what that cannabinoid has been shown to potentially do. I think that's where we are going to see a lot of focus and money and investments into that space. But I think that the legal and regulatory parameters need to come into view a lot quicker and be more transparent and be more definable, because there's still so many nuances state to state and in the country that really everybody is kind of still confused. It's not black and white. There's still a lot of gray. So I think that compliance and regulation needs to come into the picture more. And I know that everybody on the phone here is all for that, because it's only going to take the people that are making it harder for us to do it the right way, because they're out there doing it the wrong way and just trying to make a buck and using, harsh, biofuels to get, the extraction of the
They need to go. They need to go, Josh.
Yeah, exactly.
We are out of time, guys. I would like to say thank you to all of you very much for taking time out of your day to speak with us today. And good luck with all of your endeavors and your products and what the great things that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we're out of time. I'm Hillary Raimo. This is Real Talk Radio right here on KCA, Los Angeles and Southern California. Thanks so much for being here. Until next time, take care.
Bye-bye.